December 17th of the year 497 BC. This is the date of the very first Roman Saturnalia festival. This is a feast for the Roman god Saturn. This was a holiday of gift-giving, often gag gifts, a time of general drinking, partying, merrymaking, gambling, also known as a holiday for overturning social norms. Often on this feast day, Roman slave owners would set the table for their slaves, because this was seen as a time of freedom and liberation for freemen and slaves alike. December 17th of the year 546. This is the date of the Ostrogothic capture of the city of Rome. This was not the fall of the Western Roman Empire. This was a while after that. This was, in fact, after the famous Byzantine general Belisarius retook the city of Rome after the fall of Western Roman Empire. Belisarius was still alive at this time. He was not in the city at this moment, and when the cat's away, the mice will play. The Ostrogoths got in by bribing the Byzantine watchmen who were guarding the city. However, Belisarius would later come back for the last laugh. December 17th, the year 942 AD. This is the date of death for William Longsword, sometimes called William Duke of Normandy, although, the title Duke did not come into common use until a little bit later on. He was around 48 or 49 years old at the time of his death. He was assassinated, actually, on his way to a peace conference to try and settle a local conflict that he was involved in. December 17th, 1538, Pope Paul III excommunicates King Henry VIII of England. I'm sure everyone knows the story. Henry VIII had 8 wives, not all at the same time. Some of them he had killed, some of them were divorced. He wanted to get a divorce from Catherine of Aragon. The Catholic Church did not like that. The Pope refused to grant the annulment. Henry VIII took his toys and separated the entire Kingdom of England from the Catholic Church, got his divorce like he wanted, and started the Church of England. Yes, that is how the Anglican Church came to be. And in the process, well, what do you expect? The Pope excommunicates the king. December 17th, 1665, an advance in medical science. The first known blood transfusion was written about. Physician Richard Lower wrote a letter describing his attempted operation, and that letter was later published in a magazine called Philosophical Transactions of a Royal Society. December 17th, 1718, Great Britain declares war on Spain, and thus begins the War of the Quadruple Alliance. The Quadruple Alliance in question is Britain, France, Savoy, which is one of the Italian kingdoms, and Austria. This was part of a territorial dispute having to do with land in Sicily. And also to note, during this war, the first Jacobite Rising happened. That was a Scottish rebellion in Great Britain, and it was in fact backed by the Spanish crown. December 17th, 1777. During the American War for Independence, this is the day that the nation of France officially recognizes the United States as its very own nation. France during this war allied itself with the American rebels because it had a bone to pick with the Kingdom of Great Britain. A decade or so before, France lost a bunch of territory in the French and Indian War to the British. The King of France did not like this, and so the French Navy openly harassed the British Caribbean colonies while giving military aid to the English-speaking rebels in North America. December 17th, 1807, this was during Napoleon times in France. This is the date that the Milan Decree was issued. This was basically a declaration of economic warfare against the UK. It's that no country in Europe would be allowed to trade with the UK, and this was in fact a response to the British Orders in Council that happened shortly before this. That basically just said the same thing. British ships were not allowed to trade with France. December 17th, 1819, you are looking at a painting of El Libertador, Simón Bolívar. And on this day he declares independence for his nation of Gran Colombia, which was a large collection of territory in the northern part of South America, liberated from colonial European powers. He would spend a significant amount of time fighting for independence, liberating and reliberating territory, and he is celebrated in many places in South America today. December 17th, 1830, this is the date of death for Simón Bolívar. Died on the anniversary of his declaring the independence of his nation, Gran Colombia. He was age 47 at the time of his death. He died of tuberculosis, which throughout most of human history was known as consumption. Called that because the disease itself seems to eat away at you. It attacks the lungs, gives you a really bad cough, and also slowly deteriorates your muscle mass until you wither away to basically nothing. It is not a quick way to go, but this is how he died. Bolívar died in the city of Santa Marta, and his remains were later taken to the city of Caracas, where he was laid to rest. Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez actually briefly dug him up in 2010, supposedly to investigate the cause of death, but then he was reburied in a different place in the same city. He currently has his very own mausoleum in Caracas. December 17th, 1833, this is the date of death for Caspar Hauser. He was an alleged feral child. Lots of people have called him a fraud. One day in 1828, he simply showed up on the streets of the city of Nuremberg, at the time that was the Kingdom of Bavaria, with two notes, one allegedly from his mother, the other allegedly from his caretaker. Although both notes had the same handwriting, he knew very few phrases in any spoken language. One of them was, "I want to be a cavalryman like my father was," and he indeed attempted to join a cavalry regiment, or at least as much as he knew what he was doing. After learning to speak more, he claimed that at the time he didn't know what the phrase meant. He later claimed that he spent the early part of his life alone in a room, a single room. He would wake up to find bread and water every morning. At times he could taste that the water was drugged, and when he woke up the next day he would find his nails and his hair cut. He died of mysterious circumstances of a stab wound. He was found with a note allegedly from the murderer, but it seemed to be his own handwriting. December 17th, 1835, this is the date of New York City's Great Fire of 1835. And yes, they had to label these fires by year because it happened sort of often. It would take a surprisingly long time in some of these population-dense places to build with fewer flammable materials and to develop zoning regulations that prevented a lot of the fires that used to be very common. This particular fire swallowed up 17 city blocks in the financial district. Where's Jacob Riis when you need him? December 17th, 1837. One of the reasons that fires used to be a lot more common was because people used to heat their homes with fireplaces. Indeed, soot from the fireplace was the official cause of the 1837 fire in the Winter Palace, the home of the Russian Tsar in St. Petersburg. This particular fire killed 30 people who were guarding the building. December 17th, 1918, this was the day of the Darwin Rebellion in the Northern Territory of Australia. Called Darwin Rebellion not because of Charles Darwin, but because the name of the place was Darwin. This was a workers' protest spurred on by a labor group. Over 1,000 people marched to the Territory's administrative building, where they burned an effigy of the Territory administrator in protest against taxation, unemployment, and various labor policies. December 17th, 1933, this is the date of death for the 13th Dalai Lama. That is the spiritual leader of Tibet, and I know a weirdly large amount about this topic because of the book 7 Years in Tibet. Dalai Lama is a title, and it is a lifelong position. Tibetans believe that the Dalai Lama is reincarnated shortly after the present Dalai Lama dies. Only the current Dalai Lama this time announced that that might not be the case in his death. He might choose to just stay in the afterlife and not come back. But at the time of this Dalai Lama, Tibet was highly closed off. The West knew next to nothing about it. It was only explored by chance. Buddhist pacifist to the extent that they were vegetarian. They would not even hurt an animal, because in theory the animal could be the reincarnated soul of your own grandmother. And they got away with that amount of pacifism so long because they were such a high-altitude place, hard for invaders to get to. After this Dalai Lama died, however, the next Dalai Lama as a child, the current one actually, got Western education from explorers who had found Tibet by chance, and then had to flee the country because the Chinese communists. December 17th, 1938, this photograph is Otto Hahn. He was born in Prussia, died in Saxony. He was a German chemist, and he was the pioneer of the field of nuclear physics, because on this day he discovered nuclear fission in the element uranium. Because over the next decade after this discovery, the use of nuclear energy would leap forward, leading to the nuclear bomb, nuclear power, and other applications. December 17th, 1943. On this date, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was repealed. That 1882 act prohibited Chinese immigration to the U.S. for a period of 10 years. In addition, it restricted Chinese from being able to become naturalized citizens of the U.S. This act came during World War II, at a time when we were not too happy with Japan, a nation which was actively invading China. The act is also known as the Magnuson Act, named after Senator Warren Magnuson, who you can see in this photograph here. December 17th, 1944, the Malmedy Massacre. This happened during the Battle of the Bulge. It was a part of that battle. Happened in a place called Malmedy, Belgium. A Waffen SS officer ordered the killing of 84 United States prisoners of war. These POWs had surrendered, but they were put in a group in a field and then sprayed down with machine guns. Some of them who survived were later shot in the head. December 17th, 1947, this is the day of the first flight of the Boeing B-47 Stratojet. This plane was a strategic bomber. designed to fly high enough and fast enough to avoid enemy interceptors. This aircraft was long-range missions. The Americans wanted something that was capable of flying over the Soviet Union and delivering, if they need to, nuclear bombs. December 17th, 1962, this was the date of death for Tom Mitchell. He was an American actor during the golden age of Hollywood. He acted in films such as Gone with the Wind and It's a Wonderful Life. He died in Beverly Hills at the age of 70. December 17th, 1967. The picture you are looking at is Harold Holt, former Prime Minister of Australia. On this day, he took a swim in the ocean because December is summertime down there, and he mysteriously never came back. Even people who were with him don't know where he went. He was gone, never to be seen again. To this day, he has not been found, making this one of the most unusual deaths or disappearances of a national leader in modern history. December 17th, 1969, this was the closing date for Project Blue Book. That was a project by the United States Air Force lasting a total of 17 years, compiling and studying information on unidentified flying objects, UFOs. Stated purpose was to determine if they are a risk to national security. The conclusion from thousands of UFO reports and sightings that they collected was that they were unlikely to yield any major scientific discoveries. December 17th, 1989, this was the beginning of a very long era. This date is when the first episode of The Simpsons was officially aired. Season 1, Episode 1, titled The Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire. December 17th, 2003, a man named Ian Huntley is found guilty of murdering two 10-year-old girls. This happened in a town called Soham, England, and this was a high-profile murder trial known as the Soham murder. December 17th, 2008, this is the date of death for Gregor. Gregor is not a human, as you can see, he is a chimpanzee. In fact, he is the oldest known chimpanzee on record. He was born sometime in 1942. He spent 40 years of his life in the Brazzaville Zoo in the Republic of the Congo. During one of the many wars in that region, he was taken by the Jane Goodall Institute and airlifted to an animal sanctuary where he spent the last years of his life. December 17th, 2010. You know how one little thing can set off like a whole domino effect? And the results could end up bigger than anyone would have ever imagined? Well, this photograph is Mohamed Bouazizi. He was a street vendor in Tunisia. He was harassed and had his merchandise stolen by government officials. He did not like this. I'm guessing there were a lot more deeper-seated grievances going on than just one case of harassment, because he did not like this so much that he set himself on fire as a symbolic protest. That act of self-immolation is widely recognized as the beginning of the Tunisian Revolution, protest movement which ultimately overthrew the government. And that same Tunisian revolution is recognized as the first of the Arab Spring revolutions. Hey man, you're a cop, you're handing out a citation for some violation, and then several governments get overthrown. You're just doing your job, man. December 17th, 2011, this is the date of death for Kim Jong-il, Supreme Leader of North Korea. Since his death, his son Kim Jong-un has took his place. Kim Jong-il died at the age of 70. He is buried in Kumsusan Palace of the Sun. That is, of course, in the nation's capital, Pyongyang. December 17th, 2014, the United States reestablishes diplomatic relations with Cuba, and one of the funniest things I've seen in modern politics, I don't think I'll forget it, is Obama having his limp wrist held up like a trophy of war by Raul Castro. Obama was the one who reopened talks with Cuba, and it was a big thing at the time. It was a little over 50 years after Cuba Libre, the communist takeover, and then we had Bay of Pigs and Cuban Missile Crisis. And Raul, who was alive for that, who is still alive, this photo was more than 10 years ago, he is now 94 years old as dirt, was the leader of Cuba when Obama reopened those diplomatic talks. Obama opened up negotiations with Cuba on equal footing, whereas Trump, 3 presidential terms later, and you see how Obama got treated when he did that, whereas Trump is going in from the high ground with diplomatic leverage, namely the Venezuelan oil supply. And there is all the difference in the world between those two styles of leadership and negotiation. December 17th, 2016, this is the date of death for Henry Heimlich. Have you ever heard of the Heimlich maneuver? Well, this is the doctor who thought of that. Putting sudden pressure on the diaphragm in order to make a person spit off something they are choking on. Dr. Heimlich died in Cincinnati, Ohio at the age of 96. Good long life.